What's up, everybody? Happy Monday night. Hopefully your night's going well. Jumping on, we're talking Tropical Storm Erin and some of the updates with its current track, intensity, and potential threats down the road to land. It's already impacted Cabo Verde over the past couple of days. Some deaths reported out there, so a pretty potent storm system already, and there's a lot more information that's coming out tonight regarding Erin and some of the model data that we can take a peek at and the ensemble. So hopefully you're having a good Monday night. Feel free to say hello in the comments. Let me know where you're joining from, tuning in, and what the weather is where you are. We'll talk more about some of the storms that are out across the Midwest again tonight, especially across Texas. Some of those storms have been severe, eastern New Mexico as well. So hello to everybody joining. Again, happy Monday. Thanks so much for watching. If this is showing up on your feed, we're talking about Tropical Storm Erin, which is in the headlines right now. It's sort of the first major system that we've been watching this year that A, has the potential to grow into hurricane status, possibly major hurricane status, and then also B, move generally in the direction of, at least for now, the Lesser Antilles, and then we'll see what happens after that. When we start getting into peak season and we see these tropical waves rolling off of Africa, there's always a lot of talk about where they're going to go and if they might have any impact to the U.S. down the road. So we'll take a look at all of that in just a second. Just want to get everybody and everyone a chance to jump on and join before we start diving into some of the details here of what's happening out in the Atlantic basin. So hi to everybody joining again. Somebody says they live near Joplin. Hello from Joplin. I know a lot about Joplin, of course. Hopefully you're having a good night. A lot of heavy rain and thunderstorms out there the past couple of days and severe weather. Luckily, the flooding hasn't been a huge deal, but there's been really several inches of rain stretching from Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, into Iowa, Wisconsin the past couple of days. And so the ground's pretty saturated. Any more rain out there could lead to a little bit more flooding concerns. Not completely out of the woods there yet. So hey again to everybody joining. We're about now 3 minutes into our live. A lot of you are just joining and jumping on as this kind of shows up on your feed. We're talking about the tropics. We're talking about thunderstorms here out across Texas right now that are severe, particularly in Texas Panhandle. And I want to do kind of a deep dive into what's happening with Tropical Storm Erin and some of the latest data that we have out there today. Jack says, hello, how you doing? Sarah wants to know, do you think Erin could impact Georgia? It's too soon to say for sure. You know, there's a lot of people out there who are either in two different categories in boats. They're dismissing the possibility that Erin could impact the U.S., or B, they're saying that everybody along the East Coast needs to worry, and we're not there yet with either of those scenarios. This is sort of a watch and wait, and of course be prepared, as you should be anyway during peak hurricane season. We've been through this boat before, and we kind of know what to expect this time of year in terms of getting to different points as we watch the system and different sort of levels of concern. And right now we're at a pretty low level of concern, but it does have a lot of interest. And again, like I said, rightfully so, this is sort of the first big one of the season that we're watching, or at least has the chance to kind of grow into something significant down the road. So let's kind of jump into this. I've had a chance for most of you to join and pop on now. We have 79 of you here who are watching. So hey again, everybody, happy Monday night. Hopefully, today's Monday, right? Yeah, Monday. Hopefully your week's off to a great start so far, whether you've worked today, you've had the day off, you're relaxing. Want to give you an update on weather. So sit back, relax, and ask some of the questions that you may have regarding what's happening with the tropics, with Erin, or any other weather questions that you may have. Drop them in the comments, and as we kind of go through some of this, I'll check out the comments periodically and try to answer them as best as I can. So let's start first with kind of a broad view of what's happening in the Atlantic. So things are fairly quiet right now other than Erin. Let me get my handy dandy tool here, my pen out, so I can start highlighting and circling some of this. And notice how again, pretty quiet out here in the Atlantic basin, except for here's Tropical Storm Erin, and then also another couple of waves that are rolling off of Africa right now, moving towards Cabo Verde. Unfortunately, they don't need any more rain and thunderstorm activity. They just saw Tropical Storm Erin over the past couple of days. It brought torrential rainfall there, unfortunately led to some deaths. But yeah, more tropical waves coming off of Africa right now behind Erin. So far, those have not been highlighted by the National Hurricane Center, but it will be something to watch in the coming days. And it also kind of gives us an indication that behind Erin, things will probably stay busy here in the long term as well, heading into the middle and end of August, which we expect because it is peak season, like I've been saying. So there's Erin way out here in the eastern Atlantic still, and we'll take you into a little bit tighter of a view, and you can see it looks pretty healthy. For tropical storm standards, it's kind of compact, it's fairly small, but you do have a lot of convection and thunderstorms that continue to intensify and really blow up towards the center of Erin. And some of those really dark colors that you see there, almost the purples and the pinks towards the middle, that's where we have the tallest thunderstorms, and they're rotating around the center of Tropical Storm Erin. So small, compact storm, but healthy looking tonight as it continues to sort of march west. And you can see if you look closely at the past couple of hours or so, there's been a little wobble from north to south with the center of the low. Center of Erin. That's not unusual. In fact, right now, it doesn't really mean much for the eventual track of this. We start worrying more so about those small wobbles north and south once we get closer to determining when and if there will be any impacts to the U.S. down the road and closer to any landfall with tropical systems in general, generally speaking. When we get close to landfall, sometimes 12, 24 hours out, we start seeing some of those small wobbles north and south. It can have an impact on where that system eventually makes landfall. But for right now, as you see kind of these very small wobbles to the north and to the south of Erin, doesn't really mean much for where it's going to head the next couple of days. In fact, it's going to be taking a pretty much straight path to the west. So you can see healthy looking storm. For right now, it's moving away from any land. It was close to Cabo Verde and brought a lot of rain and flooding, some deaths there the past couple of days, but now it's out in the open Atlantic, steaming towards the west, and it has a lot of room for intensification here, especially as we get towards the middle of the week. So this is the latest track from the National Hurricane Center. This is from the 5 p.m. advisory. And right now, as I pull the screen down a little bit, latest stats on Erin, maximum sustained winds of 45 miles per hour. It's moving to the west pretty quickly at 21 miles per hour. So it's picking up steam and really racing westward here. At least through about tomorrow afternoon, Erin expected to stay a tropical storm. So that takes us to 2 p.m. on Wednesday when we still are having a tropical storm status here with Erin. But then look at what happens. We go from 2 p.m. on Wednesday and jump to 2 p.m. on Thursday. So 24 hours later, we go from a tropical storm to a hurricane. So sometime between the Tuesday and Thursday time frame is when we're expecting a little more intensification up to about hurricane status. Then between Thursday afternoon and Friday afternoon, we go from hurricane status to potentially major hurricane status sometime late Friday into Saturday morning. Notice the M there that I've circled. Saturday, 2 p.m., major hurricane. That's category 3 or higher. North, at least according to the National Hurricane Center, somewhere north of the Lesser Antilles. Obviously, it's going to bring a lot of rain potentially to some spots and the islands in the Lesser and near the Lesser Antilles, especially north of there, some shipping channels out there that are likely going to be impacted. And what I was going to mention here is, if you follow weather, you already know this, but what I wanted to point out to you is the cone for Erin is actually relatively small. It could be a lot bigger. And what that cone represents is not necessarily exactly where the storm is going to track, but somewhere in that cone is where the National Hurricane Center thinks the center of Erin could track. So it could track on the north side of the cone, on the south side of the cone. if you get Erin tracking on the south side of the hurricane center's cone, somewhere near here, obviously that's going to bring more impacts in terms of rain, wind, maybe surge to the Lesser Antilles. If Erin takes a more northerly jog on the north side of the cone, something like that, then not much in the way of impacts for the Lesser Antilles or for Puerto Rico, Cuba, Haiti, the Dominican Republic, way out here. Again, if Erin takes the northerly track of this cone. Also possible it goes somewhere down the middle. Once we get beyond Saturday afternoon, confidence really decreases on where this thing's going to go. It's why we don't have a cone that goes beyond what is today, Monday, 6 days here. So that's the track for now. And like I said, the cone itself is pretty small. So confidence is high now through the next 4 to 5 days as to where Erin may go, but still there could be some subtle adjustments. And then obviously the big question mark is what happens after Saturday afternoon once we get towards next week, especially Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. What will the current look like in terms of the steering patterns for Erin? So that's the cone. Notice the intensity guidance here. It really takes this system up to major hurricane status. Pretty much all of our hurricane models are on board with a major Category 3 hurricane once we get beyond 72 hours from now. So for sure, we're going to be dealing with some sort of significant system, especially as we get towards beyond Wednesday of this week. And so notice all of our different hurricane models on board with the idea of a Cat 2, likely Cat 3 storm. And just from experience, a lot of the times with some of these intensity guidances that we look at, they tend to underdo it just a little bit. And then you kind of see them make up for that as the days go on. So possibly we're dealing with a major hurricane. In fact, I would say likely at this point, Cat 3 status, and then maybe something a little bit stronger. Can't rule out Category 4, but we'll see whether or not the hurricane models pick up on something a little stronger here as the days sort of roll on this week. Now, the big question is, why is a major hurricane likely? What's happening in terms of environmental conditions that are going to support this? And so we can look to a couple of different things. First of all, I want to point out current Atlantic wind shear right now. And this is sort of a rough estimate as to what the shear looks like out there. Again, if you follow weather, and especially tropical weather, you know that hurricanes don't like wind shear. Tornadoes, they thrive with wind shear. That's one of the main ingredients that we need for thunderstorms to rotate and eventually produce tornadoes. When we talk about hurricanes, they kind of stay away from wind shear as much as they can. And when they run into it, oftentimes it completely tears them apart. Not always, but it's one of the things that can really limit the strength of a tropical cyclone. So this is kind of a rough estimate here of what our shear looks like out in the tropical Atlantic. Here's Erin, and notice as it heads westward over the next couple of days, very little wind shear out there. There could be a few pockets of maybe a little shear as we get, let's say Wednesday, Thursday. That's why Erin expected to stay a strengthening storm for the next couple of days. So it may be fighting off just a little bit of shear, not a ton, a little bit of shear now for the next couple of days. But then again, as we turn back to the National Hurricane Center forecast cone, once we get from Wednesday beyond, Thursday, Friday, and roll into the weekend, some significant strengthening is likely. And you can see why, because there's no wind shear out here. Once we get past this little pocket here that you can see, that I've circled, not much wind shear out in the tropical Atlantic as we get towards Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And so that will allow for some rapid intensification, possibly up to major hurricane status. What's the other thing that hurricanes love in addition to little to no wind shear? It's warm temperatures out in the ocean. They thrive off of the heat of the Atlantic Ocean. And so Erin, probably roughly right about there. Again, as it works westward here through the next couple of days, notice the contour here, the temperature contour starts to increase. And so you're seeing some of the oranges and the reds. That's where we get into ocean temperatures likely running, 80, 90 degrees. And so that's another key ingredient that's going to be needed for Erin to intensify this weekend up to major hurricane status, especially Friday, Saturday, and beyond. So little wind shear, very warm sea surface temperatures. Let's talk about the steering currents with this system long term. And this is where things get a little dicey in terms of forecast confidence. But I want to show you the European ensemble members. And remember, ensemble are a bunch of different ideas here of what could potentially happen. The forecast here is made up of all these different ensemble members, and each one throws out or spits out a different idea of what could happen with Erin down the road. And all those different L's that you see are members of the ensemble throwing out an idea of what it thinks may happen based on different environmental conditions. So let's kind of go through time. This is valid for Thursday, and you can see still pretty good consensus that Erin's going to continue westward through Thursday. You can also see the pressure on here because they're so tightly clustered. It's kind of hard to read some of the pressure estimates, but most of the European model ensembles keep this a tropical storm, just like the National Hurricane Center says, through about Thursday. And then after that, it intensifies a little bit more. Here we go into Saturday. Notice how tightly wound and clustered the ensemble members are through Saturday. That means there's high forecast confidence. They all agree that Erin heads westward through about Saturday. Remember, we saw where the National Hurricane Center's cone is, where the Hurricane Center thinks the center of Erin could track. It's jotted and plotted north of the Lesser Antilles. European model ensembles think that as well. And then once we get past Saturday, notice how those lows kind of spread out a little bit more. That's because forecast confidence starts to decrease. And so now we could be talking about a system approaching some of the Caribbean islands or staying really far north where some of these other lows are plotted, potentially taking more of a Bermuda track. So again, what do the steering currents look like? Why is it possible that we could have a storm that curves out to sea still, and also possible that we could have a system that maybe stays a little bit further south and west and potentially impacts land in the U.S. East Coast somewhere down the road? Well, there's two different things that we're looking at. In the near term, it has to do with an Atlantic ridge of high pressure, and that high pressure is going to determine where Erin goes for the next couple of days. And remember, high pressure is a clockwise flow, so you can see the high that is estimated somewhere around here. In fact, I'll change the color to blue, as we sometimes associate high pressure with on a weather map. So high pressure somewhere in the center of that circle, that kind of orange reddish contour, and that is going to be a key component to Erin's westward track for the next couple of days. Erin just kind of follows the ridge of high pressure now through the middle of this week, and that clockwise flow will take it out to the west. So there you go. You can see, as represented here by those tightly clustered ensemble members, Erin following along the ridge of high pressure and heading westward over the next couple of days. Then, as Erin kind of moves away from the ridge, we start talking about potentially some other components that may come into play here, including an evolving trough of low pressure across the Northeast. And again, if you follow hurricanes, it kind of seems like we get this type of setup more often than not each year, where you have a trough of low pressure and some uncertainty as to how that trough's going to evolve long term. And depending on whether or not you get a strong or weak trough across the Northeast, that will play into Erin's eventual track. So I noticed you couldn't see where I drew the L, but this is just sort of an estimate according to the European ensemble where that trough of low pressure may be as we get towards Monday of next week. So a week out, you have a trough of low pressure somewhere across the Northeast. And remember, low pressure has a counterclockwise spin to it. And so now we're talking about this low pressure system, this trough, kind of digging into the Northeast and how its steering current may impact where Erin goes. So your two key players here are going to be a ridge of high pressure out over the Atlantic and a trough of low pressure across the Northeast that may develop sometime early next week. And so you can see how really the placement of both of these will channel where the system will eventually go. And because we don't know the placement of either our high pressure ridge, our ridge of high pressure, and our trough of low pressure, and how that kind of channels Erin down the road, it's tough to rule out any impacts to the US. We can't rule it out, but we also can't say it's going to happen for sure. So that's sort of just a basic explanation here of the steering currents that we are going to be looking at down the road, and how those may come into play when we talk about Erin and its eventual impacts. Now, one thing I just wanted to take a peek at and show you here for a second, and this is just for the sake of looking for trends, right? Especially with tropical systems, we don't ever try to look solely at one single deterministic computer model run this far out, but we do start to look for trends. And so I just explained to you the steering currents and the things that may come into play that will help determine where Erin may eventually go, that trough of low pressure that's going to dig into the Northeast, and of course the Atlantic ridge of high pressure, and how it may funnel Erin. But of course, the other thing we look at is trends in the computer models and how it represents both of those things. So I want to show you, and this is just for the sake of kind of sitting here and looking at these, the GFS, or the global forecast model, run from 06Z earlier today. And you're going to see a trend from when I show you the run from 06Z today, the 12Z run, and then the most latest 18Z run. So here's 06Z, or 6Z, and you can see there was a pretty strong consensus here for more of a northerly track with Erin. Here's 12Z. It looks like the GFS tries to push Erin a little further south and a little further west. And then here's the most recent run. Again, a little further south, a little further west. We're not focusing in on exactly where it's showing Erin to go here. But what we are looking at is we're comparing each of these different runs and looking for trends. And so we can say pretty confidently, as we look at the trend throughout the day today with the GFS, it does suggest that Erin goes further south and further west. So that's why we can't completely rule out any impacts to the U.S. It's too soon to say whether or not the east coast of the U.S. will be impacted by Erin, or if this becomes a Bermuda problem, stays a fish storm completely. But I think the best thing that we can do is continue to look for trends, and then also look at the atmosphere and analyze some of those key components that will come into play when we talk about the eventual track of the system, our ridge of high pressure and a trough of low pressure, the key components there, and key steering mechanisms for where Erin will eventually go. And then, of course, as we get closer, there'll be some small scale features that we look at. But bottom line is, too soon to say whether or not anybody in the U.S. will be impacted by this, or the Caribbean. And so it's sort of a watch and wait type scenario, where we look at the trends like we just did. We don't focus in on one single computer model run and post it all over the internet, but we do look at the trends and see if there's anything that we can pick out. And then once we get a little closer to early next week, Monday and Tuesday, we'll have a much better idea as to who's going to be at play for this system if anybody. So that's sort of what's happening out in the tropical Atlantic with Erin. I want to talk about the storms tonight out in Texas, because there's been a lot of active weather across the center of the country the past couple of days, and severe weather as well. Last night we had some wild storms across northern Oklahoma, down through southern Kansas, that were spitting out winds up to 70 miles per hour and some ping pong ball size hail. So I do want to talk about what's happening with the storms across the Texas Panhandle tonight, because there is some severe weather. But I want to briefly go back through some of your comments too, as I kind of glance over these and try to answer some of these. And if I give really broad, generic answers, it's not because I'm trying to do that on purpose. It's just because I don't know, right? Like some of these comments about, is it going to hit Texas? Doesn't look like this is going to be a Gulf storm system, so a little higher confidence in that. Is it going to hit New York? Again, too soon to say whether or not there are going to be any East Coast U.S. impacts. It's been a long time since we've seen a tropical system kind of take that northeast component route there from New York up through New England. It seems like the past couple of years we've had a ton of hurricanes out in the Gulf, and those have especially impacted, it seems like, the Big Bend of Florida. Let's see. Another question about any chance it's going to hit Long Island. Too soon to say for sure. I would say if I were to take kind of like a measuring glass, I would say right now, as of tonight, there's a little higher chance that this storm makes a hard right-hand turn and curves out to sea and does not become a big issue for the East Coast of the U.S. But that's just looking at the trends for tonight and the past couple of days. Because we're still, 10 plus days out, that's not to say tomorrow the trends completely flip. We see a little bit of a pattern change in terms of the placement of that trough and also ridge, and we see maybe more of a trend towards U.S. impact. So too soon to say for sure whether or not the U.S. would be impacted by this. I think this would probably, if it was going to impact the U.S., be a situation especially for the East Coast of the U.S., maybe, again, and I really hate to narrow it down even more, East Coast of Florida, North Carolina, South Carolina would be at play here. But we're still so far out, it's tough to even say that. But generally speaking tonight, chances are a little higher this recurves out to sea and isn't a problem for the East Coast of the U.S. But again, I know I said it a million times, too soon to say for sure. Somebody says, let's see, Mesomat says, how are you, Chad? I'm a meteorologist student in Kentucky. How you doing? Happy Monday night. That's exciting to hear. Good for you. Hope all goes well. I know that is not a tough thing to, or not an easy thing to do, going through meteorology school. Let's see, somebody says, hey, Chad. Let's see. Oh, lost that comment. I don't know where that went. I'll scroll back up. All right, let's talk about, if you have Erin questions, feel free to, Mesomat says, oh, I'm good friends with Doug. That's awesome. Doug's a great guy. He is my number one mentor. He's fantastic at what he does. So nothing but the best to say about him. All right, let's talk about what's happening with the storms out here for a second. Again, if you have Erin questions, I'm just looking through the comments, feel free to shoot them my way. And I will do my best to answer them. Try not to be vague, but sometimes you have to and talk about tropical systems that are 10 days out, right? Okay, so here's what's happening with the thunderstorms out in the Texas Panhandle right now, the high plains. This is not so much the Midwest. A couple of different things have come into play today with the showers and thunderstorms that we've seen. Less severe weather tonight, generally speaking, than what we were dealing with last night at this time. That's number one, because this stationary boundary that has sort of been a big player in the heavy rain and the thunderstorms that we've seen the past couple of days is starting to get a little washed out. There is a shortwave trough that's kind of moving through the Texas Panhandle right now, along with several outflow boundaries, and that, along with some additional daytime heating, has led to some severe weather across the Texas Panhandle. Right now, things are starting to wind down. Still have a lot of heavy rain out there, especially south of our surface boundary. And one severe thunderstorm warning here, kind of riding right along that surface boundary. This is a severe thunderstorm warning for southwestern Collingsworth and southeastern Donnelly County until 10:30. Quarter size hail on this one. Winds to 60 miles per hour. Looks like it's moving southeast here, approaching Wellington with some heavy amounts of rain and the potential, obviously, for some frequent lightning and maybe some wind gusts there, 50 to 60 miles per hour. It's also sort of starting to merge with our main cluster of storms to the south, and that's why you're getting a little bit of a pop up in the reflectivity southeast of Memphis, Texas. Just noticed too, as I was chatting, we have a couple tornado warnings up here in southeastern Iowa. So both of these are radar indicated. Looks like they both go for another 38 minutes. And you do have a couple different storms here that we're watching. Looks like the more intense storm is the one out towards Bloomfield, Iowa. Let's look at the text on this. It's a tornado warning right now for central Davis County until 10:30. Tornado possible and quarter size hail. Radar indicator rotation on this. The storm looks like it is moving to the northeast at about, what do they have the speed on this one here? 25 miles per hour. And wouldn't call this a supercell. Does look like a pretty healthy storm cell, though. Here's the velocity on it and a pretty good area of rotation that's actually about to cross through Bloomfield, Iowa. Not sure there's a tornado on the ground with this one, but you can see where we have the reds and the greens. Obviously, winds blowing towards, away from the radar site. That couplet where those two meet up is where you have the rotation and maybe a developing area of circulation here that looks like it's going to cross just to the north of Bloomfield. That's Bloomfield, Iowa, likely staying south of Drakesville. This is, again, heading northeast at about 25 miles per hour. Area of rotation likely about to cross over 63 highway there and then come up on Florence, Iowa, and potentially down the road towards White Elm. I don't think the environment's super supportive of tornadoes out there tonight, but obviously, with this storm, at least in the next couple of minutes, in the short term here, you do have a good little bit of rotation. And even with the latest radar scan, rotation looks fairly healthy, heading towards and maybe going just a mile or two to the north of Bloomfield, Iowa, with a developing area of circulation and possible tornado. Radar coverage out here in southeast Iowa and northeast Missouri isn't amazing, but we can definitely pick up on that little area of rotation there. Another tornado warning here. This is the southern storm. Let's go back to our Des Moines radar site. And this is a tornado warning, again, also radar indicated for southwestern Van Buren County until 10:30. And I would say out of the two storms that are tornado warned right now in southeast Iowa, the one near Bloomfield is probably a more dominant storm, but still some broad level rotation here. And you can see the reds and greens kind of butting up against each other. That's where you have at least some broad rotation, a little area of circulation here about to move through Milton, Iowa, crossing over East Highway 2. And this storm also looks like it's moving northeast at about 20 to 25 miles per hour. Inbound, outbound winds not quite as strong on our Milton, Iowa tornado warning, but it also, again, will head northeast here over the next couple of minutes. And both of these storms, again, are fairly isolated in nature. And for this time of night and these environmental conditions, they're pretty well organized, especially that Bloomfield, Iowa storm. You do have a good bit of undisturbed inflow coming into the Bloomfield, Iowa storm. And also, too, sometimes when you get storm interactions, even though the Bloomfield, Iowa storm is separate by itself, standalone, and has some fairly undisturbed inflow coming into it, there could be some interaction here in the next few minutes with the thunderstorm down near Pulaski, Iowa, and we'll see what kind of impact that has on our Bloomfield, Iowa storm. Those storm mergers have been studied a lot more over the recent years, and sometimes they can kind of kickstart or even intensify rotation a little bit more. Comment here. Thank you for showing this to me. I live right 3 minutes from Bloomfield. Yeah, not a problem. Hopefully you're staying safe out there. Obviously, a tornado warning remains in effect. Again, this is a tornado warning. Just since I know you're listening and watching, I'll spend time on this for just a second. It's a tornado warning for central Davis County until 10:30. And the area of concern, the center of circulation on this, looks like it's passing right over Bloomfield right now. And radar is a couple of minutes behind, so more than likely whatever's out there has now likely gone just northeast of Bloomfield. It's probably coming up on 195th Street, crossed east of 63, Highway 63 there, likely crossing over 200th Street up through about 190th Street, where 190th intersects with Peach Avenue is more than likely where that rotation is coming up on. It's radar indicated, so that means best estimates are so far, there's not a tornado on the ground, but the rotation is strong enough. One could develop at any moment, and obviously strong enough that we have the tornado warning in effect. So here's timing on this as it heads northeast at about 25 miles per hour. Approximate times of arrival, rotation into the White community of White Elm in 31 minutes, Eldon 37 minutes. And just as we got the latest radar scan update here, one thing I want to kind of at least watch and keep an eye out for is maybe a second area of rotation, not quite as strong, developing east of Drakesville, Iowa. So maybe two different areas of rotation with this Bloomfield, Iowa storm, one near Drakesville, one near Bloomfield. The dominant one has just gone east of Bloomfield and another one east of Drakesville. Neither of these to me looks so concerning that I think there's a tornado on the ground. In fact, with the latest scan, the dominant area of rotation has maybe come down just a bit. But in addition to some circulation, you do have torrential amounts of rain, hail core here. Hail core's north of Bloomfield, as it often is with these individual cells, where you get the hail core on the north side and then a rotation here on the south side. Rotation might be coming down. We talked storm mergers for a second. Sometimes it can help intensify the rotation a little bit when storms kind of merge together. Other times, the storms are fighting for energy, and so you lose some of the rotation. That could be what's happening here as some of these storms kind of interact with each other. But regardless, we'll keep watching it. And so I appreciate the comments for those of you who are out there in the path of some of these storms. A question about eastern Iowa. So you do have showers and thunderstorms here. Kind of depends on where you are. You have showers, thunderstorms. Most of them are not severe across southeast Iowa. However, you do have a couple tornado warnings here. One of those near Bloomfield, the other one near Milton, Iowa, and Pulaski, Iowa, east of Pulaski. Both those tornado warning storms are kind of headed northeast over the next few minutes. Overall tonight, severe weather is fairly unlikely, at least from a broad scale across eastern Iowa, but certainly some loud storms, and then a near-term severe weather threat probably confined to a smaller corridor here across southeast Iowa, where both of our tornado warning storms are tracking. So from Fairfield to Mount Pleasant, maybe up to Washington and Wayland, I would say over the next 30 to 45 minutes, let's watch those storms to your southwest and keep an eye out on the potential for maybe a severe weather threat and some strong storms in your vicinity for sure within the next hour or so. Question about Amarillo, Texas. Let's jump down to our Texas setup tonight. So kind of a multifaceted threat here across Texas tonight, and neither of the threats are particularly high, but you have a flooding threat and then also a little severe weather threat. And the severe thunderstorm warnings have started to decrease. There is a stationary boundary that is now south of Amarillo. Thunderstorms love stationary boundaries like that. And so most of the showers and thunderstorms that we've seen tonight, and really over the past 30, 45 minutes, have been south of Amarillo and closer to that stationary boundary. You have one little thunderstorm that has popped up and rolled through downtown Amarillo over the past few minutes. Heavy amounts of rain, the cell that you're seeing that's now moving through the airport. Frequent lightning, but it's not severe, not a super huge deal, but you are going to get some heavy rain and frequent lightning as this cell drops south of Amarillo, gets out toward Lake Tanglewood and Timber Creek Canyon, as well as Rockwell Place, but it is not severe warned at this time. And generally speaking, the better threat for any strong thunderstorms tonight and heavy rain and flooding will stay south of Amarillo, close to our stationary boundary that we're watching. On the north side of that boundary, the air mass a little more stable, and so we're not seeing quite as frequent in the way of thunderstorm activity or numerous thunderstorms. On the south of that boundary, south of the warm front part of the boundaries, where you have a little more instability and a little more thunderstorm activity, which makes sense. There's also an upper level low pressure system here that is rolling through eastern New Mexico and the Texas Panhandle. It's been the combination of that upper level low, our stationary boundary, and also thunderstorms that have developed along old outflow boundaries from earlier day activity that has led to the uptick in rain and storms out there tonight. And in the Texas Panhandle, one severe thunderstorm warning remains. This is a severe thunderstorm warning for southwestern Collingsworth, southeastern Dunley County until 10:30. Strong storms possible south of our boundary here tonight, absolutely heading towards Lubbock, Wichita Falls. Severe weather, unlikely, but still can't rule out an isolated severe storm. Low grade with winds up to 60 miles per hour and maybe another severe thunderstorm warning or two with some quarter-size hail in there. I'm in the Panhandle by Amarillo. Am I safe? Does look like you're in good shape. Most of the severe weather tonight and the heavy rain will stay south of you. Things will start to dry out in Amarillo over the next hour or so. Probably some heavy rain on the south side of town, but generally speaking, you're in pretty good shape for the rest of the night tonight. Not much more in the way to come in terms of heavy rain or a severe weather threat. Questions about storms out in Indiana. So let's show you what's happening out there. And large in part, most of Indiana is dry. You do have some heavy thunderstorms that are moving out of the Chicagoland area and then into northwest Indiana over the next hour or so, with some rain, maybe a little lightning in there too. Lower visibility, but severe weather with those storms as they move into northwest Indiana looking unlikely. Thanks so much to all of you watching for tuning in tonight on this Monday night. We've been talking tropics. We've been talking storms. Not a big severe weather threat tonight across the country. In fact, not a ton going on, but we've been tracking a couple tornado warnings out in Iowa. Also, some strong to severe thunderstorms across the Texas Panhandle. A little bit of a flooding issue out there tonight as well, with a few flash flood warnings. And then we've also been talking tropics tonight, and a lot that's been happening in the tropics with Tropical Storm Erin. And we did kind of a deep dive and diagnoses into what could potentially play into where Erin goes, not just for the next couple of days, but more so down the road, especially beyond this weekend. So feel free to drop in the comments where you're watching from, any weather questions that you have. It can be about the weather tonight. It can be about weather in general. It can be about what's happening with Erin or any of the storms where you are. I know some of you tune in when the weather gets bad, which I appreciate. We've been doing these live streams more often. And so I'd love to hear where you're watching from. Chicago, we have some comments from Chicago. Hello, Chicago, one of my favorite cities to visit during the summertime. Cincinnati, Ohio. Andrew is from Cincinnati. Hope you're having a good Monday night. Let's talk about, somebody asked about New Jersey and will I be safe in New Jersey? Parker wants to know. So I think you're probably talking about the tropics, and kind of what I was talking about earlier is it's too soon to say for sure whether or not tropical storm eventually, Hurricane Erin, will impact the U.S., especially the east coast of the U.S. It's a watch and wait type scenario. Can't be ruled out, but it's not really time to worry either. And I was mentioning that it's been a long time since we've had any real significant hurricanes roll through the Northeast. It feels like last year a lot of our storms are out in the Gulf. Kansas City, Missouri, any rain tonight? Let's show you what's happening out in KC. And it's been a pretty stagnant weather setup across western Missouri and eastern Kansas the past few days, with our lingering stationary boundary, a few low pressure systems kind of riding nearby that's been leading to rainfall. It does look like most of the rain for tonight stays north of KC and then also east of there into central Missouri and southwest Missouri. Things are kind of drying out in Kansas City. Certainly not expecting a severe weather threat overnight tonight in KC. Watching from Winnipeg, Canada. Hello from Canada. Hope you're doing well on this Monday night. Thanks so much for watching. I appreciate the support. What about Joplin? Show you what's happening out in the four-state area. I know a lot of followers from Joplin. Showers and thunderstorms have been slowly waning, it looks like. There is some action across northeast Oklahoma. It looks kind of right now like the better chance for any rainfall overnight tonight, and at least in the near term, is south of that I-44 corridor, though some of this stuff looks like it's trying to slowly work northward. A couple flash flood warnings as well, one of those north of town and then another in southeast Kansas, and even one more north of Springfield as well. Very saturated ground, so it's not going to take much rainfall out there to get more in the way of isolated pockets of flooding. All right, let's talk about what's happening out in Iowa, because I know I had a couple folks who were watching from the areas that were being impacted by our 2 tornado warnings that we have, right? Kind of interesting. Here we are, 10 o'clock on a Monday night, and there's not a great setup for severe weather and tornadoes, but we do have a couple storms here that are tornado warned. And again, this is a tornado warning for northern Davis County until 10:30 with a storm that's moving east at 20 miles per hour. Putting this into loop, you can see the appendage actually on this east of Bloomfield there, east of 63. You get sort of a backwards looking hook, sort of a telltale sign of a storm that's trying to rotate a little bit. Rotation didn't look overly impressive the last time I checked, and yeah, it does look like the rotation actually has come down. The area of concern not quite as prevalent here. Looks like storms trying to weaken just a tiny bit. So there is some broad rotation northeast of Bloomfield, now east of 63, coming up on Flores, Iowa. But almost certainly, I would say that there's not a tornado on the ground with this one, as this storm, as this cell heads northeast at about 20 to 25 miles per hour. Track says east. I see it kind of moving more northeast. But here, regardless, are the latest estimated times of arrival of a tornado-warned storm. The rotation is weakening. It's coming down. Don't think there's a tornado on the ground with this one. But regardless, it is a strong cell heading towards White Elm in 29 minutes and Selma in about 38 minutes. And if I were in those spots, I'd probably be paying attention to where that one heads. Even though the environment's not great tonight, sometimes some of these storms have a tendency to recycle a little bit. So we'll watch that. And then another tornado-warned cell here with, again, rotation that's fairly broad near Lebanon, Iowa, southwest of Pittsburgh, Iowa, and some quarter-size hail on that one, at least according to the text from the Weather Service, but a severe thunderstorm warning, or rather a tornado warning, severe thunderstorm in that we're watching with some quarter-size hail until 10:30 for southwestern Van Buren County. And the broad rotation now is crossing over 20, that looks like 235th Street and Route J40, if you're familiar with the area. Again, you can see a little bit of rotation here, inbound, outbound winds blowing towards and away from the radar site, but it isn't all that impressive. You don't see super bright green, super bright red. And so, again, with both of these cells in southeast Iowa, the rotation isn't super strong. I wouldn't say it's super prevalent on either of those storms, but it is there, and enough so where the Weather Service continues their tornado warnings, but don't think there's anything down with either of those. Let's see. Question about southwestern Wisconsin and what's happening up there. So Actually, things are a lot better tonight than they were the past couple of nights. We don't have any major thunderstorms that are rolling through Milwaukee. There's some rain showers across eastern Iowa that'll move into southwest Wisconsin. But in terms of severe weather threat, it's not there tonight. A flooding threat, not really there. Obviously, any more rainfall over a saturated ground is going to aggravate any ongoing flooding issues. Joplin, Missouri, I've seen a lot of comments here about what's happening in Joplin. Get down into southwest Missouri, and a couple, again, flash flood warnings, a few flash flood warnings here in place, mainly north of Joplin, and then some areas of heavy rainfall continue. In fact, a big shield of rain across northeast Oklahoma that has just now passed, most of it at least, east and northeast of Tulsa. That rainfall isn't super heavy. There are some moderate downpours in here, but a lot of that kind of looks like it's starting to wane, fizzle out a bit, and it is south of I-44. But again, southwest Missouri, southeast Kansas, a spot where any more rainfall is going to aggravate the flooding concerns. Doesn't really look like there's going to be a severe weather threat there tonight. And then back into Texas, we've been watching showers and thunderstorms along and south of a stationary boundary that have been strong to severe at times. Severe weather threat probably starting to wane here tonight, but numerous storm clusters that extend from, again, near the Hereford area eastward towards Memphis. You kind of have one dominant storm cluster or line segment that is near Memphis. You can see some of the brighter returns of purples there south of Wellington, tracking along 83 highway. There may be a little hail with this storm that's approaching 256. It's highway 256, where 256 meets up with 62. But generally speaking, the severe weather threat in the Texas Panhandle is starting to wind down. If you're Amarillo northward, you're pretty much done with the rain for the night. And then along and south of our stationary boundary, you have numerous showers and thunderstorms, line segments, some storm clusters in here that continue to drop down to the south out towards Plainview and Childress. And some of those could aggravate the flooding issue that's already in place. Oklahoma and OKC, question about how Oklahoma City is doing. And again, I think you're going to start to dry out overnight tonight. There isn't much rainfall or thunderstorm activity, at least around you. Most of it is confined to the southern part of the state, where some outflow boundaries have ignited some scattered showers and thunderstorms near Ardmore and the Duncan area, but no real concern for severe weather right now in Oklahoma City. There is one flash flood warning from earlier rainfall out in central Caddo County until 11:30. If you're not in that area, though, not much to worry about. So we've been talking a little bit about quite a bit about the storms tonight out in the Texas Panhandle and Oklahoma and stretching back into southeast Iowa. We even have a severe thunderstorm warning here for some strong gusty winds with cells north of Columbia, Missouri. Actually, looks like you have a line of showers and thunderstorms that has intensified quite a bit up to severe strength. Let's turn on Kansas City radar, and you can see a line of showers and thunderstorms moving from southwest to northeast here across north central Missouri. So Moberly up to Macon. The leading edge of this line of showers and storms is going to produce some winds possibly up to 50 to 60 miles per hour. Could be outflow dominant at this point. Torrential amounts of rainfall, though. And again, a severe thunderstorm warning now for northeast Sheraton, Randolph, southeastern Lynn, northeastern Howard, and southern Macon County until 10:45 with that line of storms. It's moving from southwest to northeast. I think the biggest concern with it is going to be for heavy amounts of rain in there as well. So hello to everybody watching. We've been talking tropics. We've been talking about the severe weather that's been taking place tonight. Not really a big severe weather threat across most of the country, but really from a broader scale, we've had this stationary boundary that has been draped anywhere from Michigan all the way southward to the Texas Panhandle into New Mexico. Along that stationary boundary of showers and thunderstorms that have kind of ignited each and every day, and then waves of low pressure that have been riding along it, and that's helped invigorate those showers and thunderstorms, produce a little severe weather the past couple of days, but also really help to blossom more of a flooding threat. All right, so that's kind of what we have in terms of a storm threat tonight. I wanted to, one more time before we jump off for the evening, go over what's happening out in the tropics, because that's how we started our live tonight. And I had a ton of questions about what's happening with Tropical Storm Erin. And so I wanted to kind of do a mini recap of what we came here for initially, the first kind of 20 minutes of our live, which was spent talking about Erin. It is peak hurricane season now. A lot of people are following this one. There are a ton of questions. The bottom line is this: there are more questions than answers tonight, and there will be a lot of questions, more questions than answers the next couple of days about where Erin goes beyond the next 5 days and if it's going to have any impact on the U.S. So here's what it looks like tonight. You can see, again, a pretty healthy looking tropical storm. And it's compact, fairly small. Sometimes when you get tropical storms that are small in nature, kind of compact, it can help them to intensify a little bit. And you can see some of the higher thunderstorm tops in here as well. So Erin is heading west over the next couple of days, and it's going to be running into an environment that has fairly low wind shear and also some warm sea surface temperatures. So here's the track from the National Hurricane Center. Maintains tropical storm status for the next few days, and then major hurricane status as we get into the weekend. The reason for at least not explosive development here over the next couple of days, but still a tropical storm to maybe a hurricane, there's a little wind shear that Erin will run into. Now through about Thursday into Friday, you can see it represented here, that wind shear. And then beyond that, not a ton of wind shear as we get into the weekend. And so that's where some of the really, really intense strengthening could come from. Now, the big question is what happens once we get towards early next week? The data is split, and it all depends on the strength of a ridge of high pressure out over the open Atlantic and the placement of a trough of low pressure across the northeast U.S. That'll be the steering channel for eventual Hurricane Erin. So that was a mini recap of sort of what I was talking about earlier. All right, I want to thank everybody who joined tonight and those of you who have watched. I really appreciate it. We've been here since Saturday, and keep doing these lives every single night about 9 o'clock Eastern if you want to tune in. And we'll be talking about Erin a lot this week, and also what's happening with the severe weather out in the middle of the country, another marginal risk today. And then heading into this weekend, I think we have a slight risk across the northern plains. Maybe that would be on Thursday. All right. Thanks so much for watching. For those of you for tuning in, I really appreciate it. Appreciate the support again. Feel free to drop a follow if you haven't. We'll be back with more lives this week talking about Erin and any other weather questions that you have. I hope you have a safe and relaxing Monday night and a great Tuesday tomorrow. Thanks again so much.